Way of dudes, welcome to Forge World Titan. My name is Byron, and in this episode we'll be looking at the planning of our War Master Titan. For this episode we will need something to write with, something to write on, and our reference model. In this case our Adeptus Titanicus War Master Titan. Now you've seen enough of this, let's get down to the tabletop and we'll get to planning. Welcome to the desktop. So as mentioned before, you will need your something to write on, your something to write with, and your reference model. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to start drawing this model. To just put a little reference, like a note down for it. In fact, using the power of the internet, there we go. So now what I've done is I've managed to draw the whole thing real crudely, real basically, and I've also labelled each of the parts. So what we have here is we have a main hull for the back end. We've got the head, sticks out the front. This will be a lot easier if we can see it from here as well. Let me slide this along so we can see it at the same time. So we have the head is marked just here. You have the hood, which is the section above the head. You have the missiles, which is that little bit in the top there. Shoulder pads, whole large section on the side. Shoulder gun, upper arm, lower arm, gun, upper leg, lower leg, leg support, belt, and waist. With the hull being the whole section behind it, like everything behind the head. So, with those noted down as our basics, please note that I don't use technical terms. I don't really know what the technical terminology would be for any of this stuff. This is just for our personal understanding so that we can navigate the model that we're going to create much easier. I don't like to overcomplicate things. I like to keep things as simple as is physically possible. Right, we have our plan, we have everything labelled. Next up, what I'd want to do is break this, or not break it down, I'd like to merge parts together. The first part that I would be merging together would be the legs. All the legs will be merged together as one part. Boom! We have merged it, or merged sections to make larger parts. So what we've done here is we've merged the lower and upper legs with the leg supports and the belt section and the part of the waist as well to create one great big leg part. I've done this so that you can just pick the whole model up by that part if necessary. Also means we can deconstruct it later if we want to transport it, things like that. The whole top section, including the upper arm, the shoulder guns, the shoulder pads, the hood and the missiles would all be one part. The head, I keep it separate so we can remove that if necessary. The lower arms would also be one part here as well. Now that we've separated our parts, we can consider where magnets might want to be. Now magnets is what I tend to use to keep these things held together. So these would all be separate parts that we would be creating. We'd be creating a leg section, weapon section, hull section we call that, and head. But to connect them, we'll be using pretty big magnets. We'd have like one set of magnets here, for instance, one set of magnets here, and one set of magnets here, and then behind the head, there'll be a magnet there as well. So these are the main magnet points. I'll do a little circle there just to say there's one behind the head. And that's how we'll break this thing down. This gives us small and manageable parts both to work with and to construct. And when I build one of these projects, I tend to build from the legs up, or the feet up, I should say. The reason why I do that is because mainly for space. It's mainly for space. Because as I'm building up from the leg, I need somewhere to put the body when I'm not working on it. So much nicer when the legs are already in place, the magnet's already set there, and you can just place that body on the top and it's done. If we did this the other way around and we went for a weapon first, for instance, or a head first, then you'd end up having a redundant part just sat around gathering dust whilst the rest of the models slowly but surely coming together. I also find it's kind of nice to see your model coming together, like growing in a wanna. As each part is complete, it feels like a complete part of the model and it's ready for the next section. It's nice when you can just take that next section, connect it onto the model to extend what you already have. It's like a reward as you go. That's what it's like. Okay, let's take a moment and let's think about balance. Here's a brand new piece of paper, and on this piece of paper I'm just going to draw a seesaw, which is just going to be a triangle, and then I'm just going to put a plank on top of the triangle, and we're going to assume that the triangle is sat on the floor like so. In this instance, either side of the seesaw is about even, and because they're about even, the seesaw will sit flat. Nice, we're looking good so far. Okay, now let's have a look at a new scenario. Do a new floor, new seesaw, middle bit, and then we're going to move the top of the seesaw so it looks like this. Now in this instance, we are off balance, and because we're off balance, what we do is we'll just draw a little line up the middle here, and we'll see that there is more on this side than there is on this side, which in this case makes this side heavier. And because it's heavier, it wants to rotate down, in this case towards the floor, like so. Boom. So how is this relevant to us building our Titan, I hear you ask? Well, if we refer back to our drawing, you'll notice that we have magnets in the arms here. Okay, so if we bring back to this, we're going to bring an arm over here so that we can see it. Let's draw this arm very crudely with its magnet in place, and we'll pretend it's connected to another part like so, and then boom. Okay, there we go. This is what our part looks like, and this is where it's connected to the main model. Now, because it's connected to the main model, the ground is down here, and because this is the point where everything is connected, we'll draw a line up the middle here to show that that's the center point. That's acting like the axis on our seesaw diagram, but it's kind of opposite because we're hanging down instead of going up, but it all makes sense in a second. So the natural thing, or the obvious thing we see here, hopefully obvious, is that there is more on this side than there is on this side, which then means this side is heavier. Now, because the ground is in this direction, this model naturally will want to do this. Not so good. And that will want to pull that magnet away from the other magnet. It's like almost adding extra weight to it because there's more weight on this side. It's literally pulling it just on one side, and that's no good. So we need to remedy this. How do we remedy this, I hear you ask? Well, let's draw our weapon again. What I'll do in this case is I'll create a cavity in the back of this. So a hole, nice hollow hole, and in that hole I'll pour in resin, and that resin will cure, and that resin will then become solid. And what that resin will do is it will create extra weight on this side, and all I need to do is make sure, thinking about that center of balance point, I need to make sure that after adding this resin, this half here, which I can draw over in red, after adding the resin, this half of the model, or the gun in this case, weighs the same amount as the other half. That's what we'll be doing. That's how we do that. Now, that's very important to note at this stage of the plan, because what we are doing here is we're adding weight to parts. Now, going back to our original outlet, let's assume that we have just added weight to the back of this. Weight added, okay? What that's doing is it's making this entire gun part heavier, which then means you need stronger magnets. The heavier the part, the stronger the magnets. If the magnet can't hold the weight, the part's just going to fall off. And as you can see by these and on the main model, these are free hanging parts right here. These arms are free hanging. They could just, we don't want those to fall off. We don't want them to fall off under the weight. We don't want them to just go pop and fall off. We want them to stay nice and strong. So to do that, we're going to overcompensate on all of the magnets to make sure that we have maybe twice, 3 times the strength required on the magnets. So much extra, in fact, that will make it so that these magnets can't directly contact each other. So there's actually a bit of plastic between each of these magnets, but the strength is still there and strong enough to hold whatever the weight might be underneath them. Now, one thing I have noticed when building these things, or not when building these things, is when using these models in games, what I find is I tend to hold them by their legs, because that's like an easier way to hold the entire model in one. But I have found, and I do have examples of where I definitely got this wrong on the previous Titans. If I don't make these magnets strong enough, and the top half is heavier than the bottom half, and the top half will want to wobble around a bit as you pick it up. That heavier part kind of wants to shift around, and it feels very unstable and can be quite scary to maneuver. What I've found is that if I was to make the legs section heavier than the top section, everything that's connected above this magnet's point, if this bottom section is heavier than that, then it's like the light area wants to fix onto the heavier one, and you don't get so much movement. The only time you'd really see any movement is if you're really flicking this thing around, and that's just because that extra movement in flicking it around adds extra weight to it for that temporary bit of time. Other areas to consider on a model of this scale is this whole hull section. Now we're talking about a backfill in the back here to add weight. If you imagine we had that extra weight there, how much pressure is that going to have on the top section, the hull of the model? It's going to have quite a lot. So to get around that, what I'll do is create another set of cavities, if you like, or even just one big one. They'll act like this. Just going to draw this on here. I'm going to fill this. This is going to work like a spine across the whole thing. And it's going to give it a solid amount of support across the middle. It's going to be all the way down the middle of the spine to hopefully end up just over that magnet there. And that will give us a lot of weight in the top, but also a lot of strength. Now, because we've added weight here in this part of the arm and here in this part of the top of the model, we now have a top half, everything above this magnet here is getting pretty heavy at this point. We don't need to know exact numbers, we just need to give ourselves an idea of what's coming. So in this case, to compensate for the extra weight that's been added here and here in the legs, we will need to create another great cavity like this, and one along here as well. It goes from top to bottom, which will add weight into the leg sections. and also make them a lot more solid and rigid on their own. Hopefully, altogether, that should do the trick. Now that we have this vague plan, we now know that we can actually start building from the legs up, but make sure that we're filling it up with resin as we go, which would then ensure that we are definitely prepared and set, ready for the rest of the body that's going to be attached later on. As for general planning, I feel like that should be just about it. Now you'll notice that this is a very bird's eye view of planning. There are so many tiny little intricate parts on this, and small guns and little like rivets and edges and things. These are all things that we don't plan at this stage. We'll be planning those separately as we build. This is just for the overall model. The reason why we do a plan for the overall model is to make sure that we don't build out an entire section that then has to go to waste because we didn't plan ahead on the next area. For instance, if we didn't counterweight these guys, we would have built the whole thing and then the arms just would have drooped. The magnets might have just, that little bit of extra weight might have been slightly too much, and the guns might just fall off all the time, and the model will be wobbly, and that would be no good to anybody. So to plan this far ahead gives us that little bit of insight, which then means that we can work with that in mind, and knowing that these might be potential setbacks, and then we don't have to fall into those traps later on. So with that, I do hope that you enjoyed and learned a lot from this video. If you did like it, feel free to drop a like, and if you are new to the channel and would like to get notifications every single time a new episode comes out, then feel free to click that subscribe button. Speaking of next episode, in the next one we will be doing orthographic drawings. So for this we will need a calculator, a set of calipers, a compass, pencil, pen, quite a few tools, sharpener potentially for your pencil if you like to live dangerously. If not, a sharpener will be absolutely fine. Rubber if you're prone to making mistakes. And the most important things I would say is the ruler. A nice metal ruler is good. And some paper. Now you could by all means go and grab some normal printer paper. If that's what you've got available, just, yep, absolutely feel free to use that. Personally, I like to use something thicker. So printer paper is 80 GSM. I have no idea what the thickness of this paper is. It feels like it's probably like twice as thick. So we'll estimate that it's like 150, 160 GSM. I don't know. Either way, it's slightly thicker. And the reason why I personally like slightly thicker paper for this task is because I'm going to be stabbing it with compasses a lot. And if you stab normal paper and printer paper with a compass too many times, eventually it's going to start, well, there'll be holes everywhere, it'll start to rip, it'll become a bit of a problem. With this stuff, you can stab it a lot, it's going to be fine, it's going to deal with it, it's going to take the hits. And that's what I like. I like the paper that can take the hit and can last a lot longer. There'll be lots of parts that will be repeated, so you only want to draw them once. This will allow you to keep coming back and retracing over the same thing to get new parts. But more on that in next episode. For now, I'd like to thank you all for joining me on this planning adventure in planning. And yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care.